So if you look into a couple of different debates across Europe, and this is across Germany, Denmark, the UK, and so on and so forth, with regard to certain issue areas, there are narratives present in public discourse that are clearly from an ideological standpoint more towards conservatism. One good example for that would be the tax debate, where taxation is very commonly framed as a burden, as something that is keeping us down, that is keeping us from reaching goals in life, something that we can be relieved from.
Right. Let's get back to that in a second, but let's just look firstly on a map, a political map of Europe, which actually represents what kind of governments we have. Of course, not surprisingly, the red colors represent center-left governments, the blue center-right governments. Even in Germany, you could argue that it should be both red and white, red and blue with the current government. What's the problem here? You see the center-left dominating quite a lot of big countries, right?
So I think, the more general problem, and this of course depends on, where you come from politically. So if you want to have a balanced picture like that, maybe this is just fine. But let's assume that you do come from a more progressive ideology and political camp or activist group. You would like to see progressive values be lived across countries in a, kind of tangible way across Europe. And in the long run, this is not going to happen in a Europe where the debates are framed in ways such that the upcoming generation, such as that many people who are maybe more moderate or centrist, are continuously veered more toward conservative ideology and value systems.
Right.
Maybe not in their votes today, maybe not in their votes in 4 years from now, but long term.
Right. Okay, let's talk about your argument about tax. Let's see a clip where we will first see the leader of the leading anti-tax party in Denmark, and then two other politicians. And you can explain what you're talking about.
Jeg mener, at i første omgang ville det være fantastisk at få halveret selskabsskatten. Man burde egentlig fjerne den fuldstændig, fordi det vil give et kæmpe boost i forhold til investeringer i Danmark. Nye arbejdspladser, tusindvis af nye arbejdspladser. Og det er det, vi har brug for, hvis vi skal sikre, at der også er råd til velfærdssamfundet fremover.
Wenn wir nicht ein klares Bekenntnis zu soliden Haushalten abgegeben hätten, wären wir heute nicht einmal da, wo wir jetzt sind. Es war eine unbedingte, notwendige Voraussetzung.
Altså, vi gør jo det, vi finder er helt nødvendigt i tiden. Altså, vi giver jo ikke selskabsskattelettelser for sjov, eller fordi vi synes, at det var da en dejlig opgave at løse. Vi gør det for at forsvare arbejdspladser.
And in the end here, we saw the Danish finance minister talking about tax relief as a way of creating jobs. What's the problem with that?
So the overall problem is this: to make it very short, any abstract political concept that is not tangible in terms of our everyday world experience, we have to recruit to more tangible ideas to make it comprehensible. In this case, we take taxation, an abstract idea, we make it understandable as something that's a burden we can be relieved from. In terms of a conservative ideology, this makes perfect sense, because in that value system you do want maximal competition, you want people to work hard, and taxes are something that keeps them back in life. Now, if you're a conservative and you use this frame, that's wonderful and fine and dandy. If you're a progressive politician, you use that same frame, you activate, you evoke, and you strengthen in the long run the value system of your political opponent.
But almost objectively, this is a burden. It's something that it's your money that you've earned that you're going to give away to someone else. The definition of tax. And
that would be the conservative definition of tax. And here's why. If you think about the taxation system and the social infrastructure and the material infrastructure in a nation, and you take a progressive viewpoint, then you say, well, as a matter of fact, taxation is the basis of my freedom. It's the basis of my personal life. It's the basis of my professional life.
So they should call it a freedom contribution?
Well, in any case, they should find a framing that makes two things clear. First, it's the basis of freedom. Second, it's the basis of your own protection. I'm just saying healthcare, environment, all these things that we as a social body manage and protect ourselves around. And third, it's also upholding certain human standards that if you understand yourself as a group in which you want to make sure that certain human standards are maintained, you will need taxation to make that happen and be a good society in that sense.
But most people would like to pay a smaller amount, a smaller percentage of their income in tax.
I think actually possibly one of the reasons that people would like to pay fewer taxes is that the framings are such that we do not, on an everyday basis, I don't open up the newspaper and see This is what taxation means. I'm going to be, getting into my car, driving to work, visit my grandmother in the hospital in a great healthcare system, and all these freedoms and all these good moments of my everyday life, even the fact that I get clean water out of the tap in the morning for my coffee, that is my tax money.
But do we know this? I mean, is this a fact that people actually are influenced that much by framing in the way that they are actually voting?
Absolutely, yes. So if you take people and you give them one in the same policy area and one in the same facts and statistics about crime, about the environment, about taxation, and you offer two different framings, and this can be as subtle as one word that's different in the text. People do shift toward the right, toward the left in their voting, in opinion polls as well, because framing the language we use...
Sure about that, because people don't really change that much in their voting. I mean, they're influenced by their parents, their environment, the household they've grown up in, the values that they've been installed with by their parents and so on, not by the words used in the days before the election.
So actually, people are influenced in their political cognition very heavily by the language that is being used around them, whether that be your parents, whether that be your friends, your school, your university, or the newspaper, right? Public discourse. Yeah. So no matter where your linguistic experience comes from in your life, it is going to shape your reasoning tremendously.
But you're claiming that the public discourse is dominant in the way that it actually influences the way we're thinking about this.
It is a strong determiner. There are others. Right. Genetics, for instance, is a determiner of our ideology. Right. So certain things, just because you brought up nature and nurture, certain things are encoded in our brain when we are coming into this world, and you cannot change the thing about it.
So let's take another example, and then I can ask you also about that. This is immigration. You mentioned that in the beginning, and we're also going to take two Danish politicians and a British. Let's have a look.
Vi skal skelne, så de mennesker, vi ved, der har let ved at finde falde til rette her i Danmark, altså for eksempel en kristne amerikaner, skal have nemmere ved at komme hertil, end for eksempel ham, der kommer fra Somalia.
Nigel Farage, just take us through, so what do you want to ban?
The covering of the face in public places and public buildings. I mean, after all, I can't go into a bank with a motorcycle helmet on. I can't wear a balaclava going around a district and circle line. What we're saying is that this is a symbol. It's a symbol of something that is used to oppress women.
Det er en begrænsning af kvinder. Jeg accepterer fuldstændig, at du har valgt det selv. Men når jeg ser en 13-årig pige med et tørklæde, så må jeg ærligt indrømme, at det provokerer mig.
Your scarf provokes me, our Danish Prime Minister just said. What's the problem with that framing?
Let's talk about where that framing comes from. That framing comes from an ideology, from a value system, which has a very strong emphasis on small in-groups and very clearly defined in-group identity. What we know about conservative value systems is that there's a strong need to have a small, definable in-group. For a progressive person, for a progressive identity, that is not the case.
But the question is really if that actually affects how people are voting. We were just talking about this. There were 3 elections in a row where the Prime Minister's party, the Social Democratic Party, lost the election, even if they tried to frame immigration in a very positive way, as a positive contribution to society and so on, and they lost. So doesn't that actually run counter to your argument that maybe the reason that people are not voting for this party when they were framing in another way was that they simply didn't buy this framing. They thought otherwise. They disagreed.
Right. So I think, this is probably a good moment to bring up the fact that if you look at framing and you look at separate issue areas, you only get so far. Overall, across issues, there are certain value systems that you either communicate successfully or you don't. So even if you say, take immigration, you have a really good progressive framing for that one issue, and you leave the rest of the field mostly to conservative framings, this one issue area being framed different is not going to latch into the cognitive system of your common citizens the same way as if you were to go across issue areas and say, you know what? We don't want small in-groups, we want large in-groups that are tolerant and open. This applies to immigration, this applies to people getting health care no matter what their background. This applies to education, this applies to taxation, which is the basis of having larger in-groups. Which is the basis of having a society that is open beyond...
But are you just taking away the most banal position that you could have, that people are actually voting right, center-left voters at some points thought that immigration, it's too much. There's too much immigration. We're living next to growing immigrant ghettos. Crime and so on is on the rise. We want to stop this. We want reform, and this is why we're voting for the right wing. Are you just totally ditching that obvious point?
My answer to this is I'm a cognitive scientist and a linguist, so the moments in public discourse and togetherness that I look at and that I know impact our cognition is the language and the framing. Are there other factors in policy making and decision making beyond language? Of course there are, but the truth is language shapes our cognition. So a lot of the decisions we make are going to be strongly influenced by language, but they're not the only factor in our lives.
But a lot of politicians that are sitting, across from me on this table would say that, or are often saying that the main problem why the voters don't buy our policy is because of communication. And often I think, well, this is just a way of, not talking about the real issues that people disagree. But are you actually saying that they're right? It is about communication.
Can I actually take you up on that citation you just gave me? You said that politicians sit here and they say we need to sell ideas to the voters, right?
And then
this is fundamentally undemocratic. So let me say one thing that is important about framing. Framing, the way in which we study it, the way in which I try to bring it into public consciousness, is the idea that whatever drives you as a person in politics, right? Your identity, your values, you need to communicate those successfully as an individual and as a group. And you do not do that when you use your opponent's language. But this is about being transparent. It's about maintaining cognitive plurality in a democracy by using plurality in language.
So what should they do? You look at that map, you look at the center left, who has obviously had some real difficulties during the economic and financial crisis in Europe to actually take on the debate or own the debate. What should they do?
The center left? Here's what I think they should do. They should sit down and first become very clear about what the moral motivation in politics is. What are our value systems? Oftentimes I talk to left-wing groups and I ask them, what are your values? And they will say environmental protection, women's rights, and higher taxes. Those are not values. Those are positions that stem from underlying value systems in your reasoning. And this is where people need to get back to. Politicians need to be very clear on this. So this is a cognitive process within the groups. And then find the right language to communicate those values honestly.
But isn't this what they're doing? And not just in this country, but in many other European countries. The center-left is saying, we are making these reforms. We're on tax, on welfare, on immigration, on all kinds of issues. And we're doing this not to please the right or because we have, taken over their way of framing, but because we want to save the welfare state out of necessity. What do you think of that? So
essentially making the argument that we're going to have lower taxation to save the welfare state?
Yes, lower taxation, lower taxation towards companies, in order to make the wheels run again, to make the economy on the move, and so on. I mean, the old right-wing argument, but the argument now from the left is we're going to save the welfare state.
So here's the thing: whenever you move toward the so-called political middle in your communication or in your policy making, you are leaving your original value system that you came from at some point. So let's say that there's absolute factual necessity to cut taxes. Let's say that the left wing says, we buy this.
We need this.
Find a way to communicate it within your own frames. Find a way to be honest about where it comes from. And if it is factually true, then you're done for the day and you can go home. But if you move toward the right because you're trying to catch voters, you're trying to become more, appealing to the middle, all of that, don't do it. You're shooting yourself in the foot, because the moment you move toward the middle, what you do is you push people ahead of you toward the right, because there is no ideological vacuum in the middle. There is no semi-ideology. The middle is a mix of the two camps, if you want. Talk to the ones who are on your side, make clear where you come from, and that's how you get voters to be on your team.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Det var deadline for i dag til sidst.